What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Eric Wilson, today joined by my co-host, Anthony Rivardo. The NHL season is coming up rather quickly. Preseason starts in about 3 weeks from the time of this recording, so things are starting to ramp up. We're going to start ramping up the content as we approach this upcoming season. So if you want to see all of that, make sure you guys like, subscribe, ring the bell so you don't miss notification. But today, we're going to be talking about the Rangers goaltending situation for this upcoming season. Obviously, we have Igor Shesterkin, the number one goalie in the world, as our starter. But we do have a pretty decent backup. I would go as far to say that the Rangers have the number one goaltending tandem in the entire NHL, with Shesterkin and Jonathan Quick leading as backups. So how should the Rangers really utilize Quick, or really both goaltenders, this upcoming season? Obviously, you want Shesterkin to play most of the games, but kind of reserving his energy for the later parts of the season is also really important. And Quick is coming back again, and you had a pretty dominant season last year. So we're going to dive into this discussion. But before we do, like I said before, make sure you guys like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. And lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. But before we really get into it, Anthony, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm excited for the NHL season to start up here. In under a month, the preseason begins. And then obviously, as we know, it quickly ramps up into the regular season. It's been a long time without some Rangers hockey. It's been slow. It's been boring. But there have been some intriguing storylines throughout the offseason to follow, namely what's going on at goalie. And even taking it a step further, like we're going to discuss projections for this upcoming season and how much playing time we think should be allocated to each one of these guys. But when you think ahead, there might be incentive for the Rangers to get Quick on the ice, even more considering Igor Shesterkin's big payday that he's in line for next offseason, which is obviously going to be a hot topic of conversation. It's already become one, and we're over a year away from even having that conversation, or I guess a little under a year away. But throughout the regular season, the conversation is only going to strengthen. It's only going to become more important. And once we get to next offseason, it's going to be the big deal. How much are the Rangers going to pay Igor? Are they going to pay Igor? How much are they willing to pay him versus what he wants? All of those storylines are going to be followed, but they all relate to the performance of Igor and the performance, even, I think, of Jonathan Quick, and whether or not he wants to keep playing or if he wants to retire. I think all of these factors will be considered when we get to that conversation next offseason. But for this Rangers team in the present, looking to do better in the postseason than they did last year, but repeat their regular season success where they won the President's Trophy. Not only did Igor Shesterkin play a key role in that regular season success, so did Jonathan Quick. He was very important with his 18 wins. He had 2 shutouts. He was great, a .911 save percentage. Can't say enough good things about him. So I'm excited to discuss it, kind of talk about this goalie situation, talk about how the Rangers have 2 great elite goalies and need to get the second one on the ice, maybe just a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Jonathan Quick last season, you kind of touched upon his stats right there. I mean, I just want to recap, Jonathan Quick is a goalie who has won 3 Stanley Cups throughout his career, one of which against us, which is unfortunate, but redemption arc for him, I guess. Last season, his first season with the Rangers, he looked like he was back in his prime. I remember at the beginning of the season, I don't remember how many games it was, but it was a handful of starts before he received his first loss. He started like 8-0 or something crazy like that. He ended up playing in a total of 27 games where he picked up 18 total wins. That stat right away doesn't seem that ideal. I mean, he did kind of slump towards the end of the season. I don't even want to say slump. His stats faltered a little bit. He finished with the 2.62 goals against, the .911 save percentage, like you said. And to me, for a backup, those numbers are pretty ideal overall. And you look back to how he started off last season, and those numbers were even higher, or better, I should say, because you don't really want a high goals against average. But my faith in Jonathan Quick is extremely high. Yeah, he's old. I believe he's like 38 years old now, coming towards the end of his career. I'm kind of shocked he didn't retire last season, and he did choose to come back to have another shot with the Rangers on just another 1-year deal. So who knows, he might retire after this year. Maybe he just keeps signing 1-year deals until he feels like it's time to call it quits on the league. But heading into the season, I don't care that he's old. I look at the fact that last season he looked like he was still in his prime, and he came in every game that he started. I felt confident. There have been times in the past where we've had backup goalies. We start games and I'm like, I don't know, we could lose this one if this guy doesn't step up his game. But my faith in Jonathan Quick has never wavered. And 27 games played last season. I kind of want that number to be higher. It's an 82 game season. Obviously, Igor Shesterkin is going to get most of the starts. He deserves to. He's the starter. That's how the game works. But we've also seen in the past times where Igor Shesterkin has played too much. By the time we get into the postseason, he's drained, and it kind of shows in our overall playoff performance. If Igor isn't on his A game, the entire team kind of fumbles a little bit. And I think that's what the Rangers did really well last season, was a nice balance between the two starts, between Shesterkin and Quick. And that's what led to Igor Shesterkin still carrying this team on his back up until Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. That was a deep postseason run. We were 2 games away from making it to the Stanley Cup Finals, where personally I think that we could have beaten the Edmonton Oilers. I think last year was our shot. But I think that's kind of the same approach the Rangers really need to look at heading into this season. Just because Igor Shesterkin is the number 1 goalie in the NHL doesn't mean you have to play him every single game. You have a good backup who can easily get you wins against other top teams in the entire NHL. So utilize that. Shesterkin might be the more famous one, the guy who gets all the spotlight, but Quick, he knows what he's doing. Like I said before, he won 3 Stanley Cups. He knows how to win games. So I think we do need to rely on him a little bit more. I wouldn't even be mad if we split it 50-50. They each get like 41 starts. But obviously that's not going to happen. 27 starts last year. I would aim for maybe low to mid 30s, in my opinion. I think that's like a good number that the Rangers should be aiming at, depending on obviously the circumstances of the season. If the whole team's slumping, you might need Igor. But heading into the season with an optimistic view, not knowing what's coming, I would like to see a little bit more from Quick.
Yeah, I'm with you. Somewhere in the low to mid 30s makes a lot of sense for me. I think that the problem here is it's so tough to take Igor off the ice because he's so freaking good and you don't want to lose a step. But the blessing is Jonathan Quick last year, anytime you did put him on the ice, you didn't lose a step. So I think that it's important for the Rangers to balance keeping Igor out there and allowing him to succeed and keeping him energized for the postseason. Now, he was completely energized this postseason. He was a brick wall. He was nearly perfect in almost every single game. It wasn't Igor's fault. Whenever the Rangers lost those games, it was usually due to the defensive lapses or from some of their top forwards going invisible for a couple games. It wasn't Igor. So it's kind of hard to have this argument and be like, well, you want to save him for the postseason. You want him to be healthy and fully rested. I mean, even though he played a lot last year, it didn't matter. Like, he was still elite in the postseason. So I don't know. It's kind of hard to make that argument, but I think just more so Quick is good, and it's good to get a change of pace, and it's good to just give Igor some rest when he needs to. And again, I do think that it factors into the conversation about his contract at the end of the year. And I think that there are ways that the Rangers can keep that in mind, not try to screw over Igor in any way by taking him off the ice in crucial moments, nothing like that, but they can just feel more comfortable knowing that if something goes wrong in their negotiations with Igor next year, and for whatever reason he decides to leave, maybe they can feel comfortable going into another year with Jonathan Quick if he decides to return, and maybe somebody younger that they want to call up or find somewhere else in the league. So I do think that's part of the conversation, but really it's just to be in praise of Jonathan Quick and how well that he played last year. And he's been working hard. He's been training. He took in Matt Rempe for the offseason, and they've been training together. When I was at Fanatics Fest, Ty Domi, Mike Richter, they were talking about Jonathan Quick. They said he's going to kick ass this year. Henrik Lundqvist also mentioned how much he likes Jonathan Quick and how great he thinks he is. So all of that being said, I'm excited to see him. I think that we get more from him this year. 30 to 35 games, somewhere in that range makes more sense. 27 games last year was a solid total. I think that they can up that a little bit, give Igor a little bit more of a break, and feel comfortable putting Jonathan Quick on the ice. Granted, he needs to play at the same level, though. If his save percentage falls underneath the .900, then he's probably not going to get on the ice as much. But he really was elite last year in the 27 games that he played. I'm happy to give him a little bit more ice time as long as he plays even close to that level that he performed last season.
And I think he will. I mean, I kind of went on a little rant about it at the beginning of this episode, but my confidence in Jonathan Quick is just so high. When we first made that signing last year, I was like, this is decent. He's a Stanley Cup winner who has leadership abilities. And I thought his biggest impact would come in the locker room, being that natural leader who's led teams to multiple Stanley Cup championships. But I know I was happy to be wrong where he did bring that, but he also brought elite skill still in his old age. So, I mean, he is 38 now. So there is a very likely statistical chance that as he gets older, stats are going to start to decline. But from what I saw last season, just a couple months ago, he was still playing at the top of his game. So I'm hoping he can hit the ground running this season. But as far as Igor Shesterkin's contract goes, I feel like it's going to be a really messy situation. It's either like the season ends and then the Rangers just immediately hand Igor what he wants, or it's going to go all over the place. Because, I mean, when I say I want to see more of Jonathan Quick, it's not because I don't want to see Igor play. Obviously, I love Igor, and overall, he is the better goaltender. And it is about resting him for the postseason as well. But kind of like you mentioned a little bit, if Igor plays less, possibly that average annual value could go down. Like the Rangers could make the argument like, we love you, Igor, but we don't need you to start every single game. Like we have reliable other options. I don't know how Igor would take that. If Jonathan Quick starts earning more starts, maybe Igor would rather go to a team that's going to give him as many starts as possible, where he can go and win a Vezina trophy again, like we know he can, maybe win like the Hart Trophy as league MVP somewhere. So I think there's just so many factors that come into it. I'm just hoping Igor loves being a Ranger and he understands that if he doesn't play as much, it's because we know he's like the GOAT and we're just trying to save him so he can win a Stanley Cup. But who knows? I can see it going all over the place. I'm just hoping that both goaltenders get a decent amount of start. Igor Shesterkin wins the Vezina Trophy again. Jonathan Quick wins as many games as possible and however many games he plays. And hopefully both goaltenders will just remain a New York Ranger next season as well. Hopefully Jonathan Quick says, I got one more year in me. Let me sign another 1-year deal with New York, my hometown team. And maybe he wins the Stanley Cup with us next season. But I'm excited to see them both play. Confidence in both goaltenders very, very high. It's going to be interesting to see how Peter Laviolette chooses to make his starts. But I guess only time will tell to see. So, I've about wrapped up my thoughts unless you have any closing remarks.
No, I think we're pretty much in agreement. It's going to be interesting to see how this goalie split goes this season. Obviously, we're going to see a ton of Igor, but we'll see how much Quick we get. And it's really just going to depend on how well he's playing as he continues to advance in age. But I have a lot of confidence in Quick. I think that he's great. I think that he played phenomenally last season. And I have a lot of confidence in this Rangers team. I know it wasn't necessarily the summer that Rangers fans wanted. They didn't make the big splashes that were anticipated. However, I still think this team did plenty to continue to position themselves as one of the best teams in the East. And I don't think that they lost anybody too significant, maybe didn't gain anybody too significant, but they did set themselves up where most of their roster is intact. They can get off to a strong start like they did last year, like Quick did last year, maybe make a move at the deadline, find that last 1 to 2 pieces, go into the postseason, and hopefully do better than they did last year. And that's what I'm hoping to see because It's been a long time coming.
It has been a long time coming, 30 years to be exact. It'll be 31 years this year. Maybe that's the destiny. We always talked about the 94 coincidences that happened last year because it was 30 years later. It's the 30th year anniversary. We have to win it. This is 31, though. Where's number 31? Igor Shesterkin. He's going to win the Conn Smythe as playoff MVP 31 years after the Rangers' last Stanley Cup. Calling it now. But, this season should be really exciting, just as exciting as last year. I think we did improve. Even though we didn't make that big splash, like you said, I think adding Riley Smith to our roster is an improvement over Blake Wheeler. So, we should theoretically do just fine. But like we said at the very beginning of this episode, preseason just around the corner. The season's going to start to ramp up. So our content will be ramping up too as August comes to a close. So if you guys want to see more, please make sure that you guys like, subscribe, ring that bell so you don't miss notification. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below on just your overall expectations for the season. Not even just the goaltending situation that's coming, just how are we feeling headed into this season? Confidence high, low? Let us know. Curious to know. But lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. Most importantly, have a good one, and let's go Rangers.